Bring the suitcase out here.
My phone buzzed against my thigh as I dragged my carry-on through the JFK arrivals terminal, the notification lighting up with another text from my landlord. Same threat, different wording. 3 days to pay rent, or he would change the locks and pile my belongings on the curb like the garbage he clearly thought I was. I deleted the message without responding, shoving the phone back into my jacket pocket with more force than necessary. What was I supposed to tell him? That the interview in Boston had been a spectacular waste of my last $200? That the editor had smiled with practiced sympathy while explaining my pitch on municipal corruption was too local, too niche, not sexy enough for their audience. 29 years old with a journalism degree gathering dust, and a resume full of freelance work that barely covered utilities. This was supposed to be different. I was supposed to be different. The baggage carousel groaned to life with a mechanical shriek that made my teeth ache, spitting out suitcases in chaotic rotation, like some kind of capitalist roulette wheel. I stood among the mass of exhausted travelers, all of us wearing the same expression of resigned impatience, watching an endless parade of black bags circle past. Mine was supposed to be distinctive, one of those cheap knockoffs with a broken wheel that pulled hard to the left, a souvenir from better financial times. But when I spotted what looked like mine, the wheel rolled smooth and straight. Didn't matter. Black suitcase, same dimensions, close enough. My brain was too fried to care about minor discrepancies. I grabbed the handle and headed for the rideshare pickup zone, weaving through clusters of families and business travelers who all seemed to know exactly where they were going. The Uber driver was a middle-aged man who didn't speak beyond a grunt of acknowledgement when I confirmed my address, which suited me perfectly. I leaned my head against the cold window and watched Queens blur into Brooklyn. A 45-minute journey of stop-and-go traffic, construction zones that seemed to multiply like weeds, and potholes deep enough to swallow a small child. By the time we pulled up outside my building, a 6-story walk-up in a neighborhood the real estate listings optimistically called emerging, my neck had cramped into a knot of tension. The rest of us who actually lived here called it broke, or transitional, if we were feeling charitable. The suitcase thumped against each step as I climbed to the 4th floor, the sound echoing in the stairwell that perpetually smelled like someone else's dinner, an industrial cleaner that never quite masked the underlying decay. My apartment greeted me with the aroma of Thai takeout I had forgotten to throw away 3 days ago, mixing with the faint mustiness that came with buildings older than my parents. I dropped my bag by the door, kicked off my shoes, and collapsed onto the couch that had come with the place, complete with the previous tenant's cigarette burns still dotting the armrest like some kind of trashy constellation. I should have unpacked immediately. Should have showered off the recycled airplane air and train station grime. Should have opened my laptop and started pitching another story to another editor who would politely reject it. Instead, I hauled the suitcase onto my coffee table, the one I had found on the street corner with a sign that said free, and unzipped it with hands that felt like they belonged to someone else. Wrong clothes stared back at me. Designer labels I couldn't pronounce, folded with military precision I would never achieve even if someone held a gun to my head. A laptop that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. A leather toiletry bag containing cologne that smelled expensive even through the sealed bottles. Everything was men's items. Expensive men's items. Definitely not mine. My heart kicked hard against my ribs, that sinking feeling of oh no spreading through my chest like spilled ink. This was someone else's life, carefully packed and organized. Someone with money and taste and the kind of attention to detail that spoke of control. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the contents, my tired brain struggling to process. Then I noticed the leather portfolio tucked into the side pocket, partially hidden beneath a stack of pressed dress shirts. I pulled it free, and documents spilled across my scratched coffee table like an accusation. Some in English, others in what looked like Italian. Official seals pressed into thick paper, signatures that swooped with authority, columns of numbers that looked like wire transfers. The kind with too many zeros to be anything innocent. My journalist instincts fired before common sense could grab the reins and yank me back. This was information. This was a story. This was exactly the kind of thing I had been searching for. Evidence of something bigger than myself. Bigger than my failing career and overdue rent. I grabbed my phone and started photographing everything. Page after page, I captured it all. Account numbers that looked like they belonged in offshore havens. Names I didn't recognize, but my instincts screamed were important. A senator's official letterhead with handwritten notes in the margins. Dates, locations, transactions that formed patterns I couldn't quite decode yet but knew meant something significant. This was something. I didn't know what yet. But this was absolutely something big. Something worth investigating. Something that could save my career if I played it right. I was reaching for another stack of papers, my fingers trembling slightly with adrenaline and possibility, when I felt it. A faint vibration coming from somewhere inside the suitcase lining, subtle but insistent, like a heartbeat that didn't belong. I pressed my palm flat against the fabric and traced the sensation to its source, finding a hard, rectangular lump sewn carefully into the interior panel. My fingers found the edge of the stitching, and I ripped it open without thinking. Fabric tearing with a sound that seemed too loud in my quiet apartment. A small black device tumbled into my palm, no bigger than a matchbox, blinking with a tiny red light that pulsed like a warning I should have heeded hours ago. GPS tracker. Military grade by the look of it. Active and transmitting. The air left my lungs in a rush that left me dizzy. Someone knew exactly where their suitcase was. Someone was tracking it in real time. Someone knew it was here, in my fourth-floor apartment in Brooklyn, with me hovering over it like an idiot who had just photographed what was probably extremely classified and dangerous information. I stood so fast my chair tipped backward and crashed to the floor. My phone shook in my hand as I pulled up the airport's customer service line, fingers fumbling over the screen. An automated voice answered, cheerful and unhelpful, offering me a menu of options that didn't include I accidentally stole someone's suitcase, and they're probably coming to kill me now. I stabbed at numbers, navigated through endless loops, got dumped into hold music that mocked my rising panic with its cheerful jazz melody. I hung up and tried again. Same automated voice, same useless menu, same hold music. It was 10 p.m. on a Tuesday night. Nobody was coming to help me. Nobody was even answering their phones. I moved to the window and pulled back the thin curtain, the fabric rough under my fingers. The streetlight below cast everything in harsh orange, illuminating 3 black SUVs parked in perfect formation along the curb. Tinted windows that reflected nothing back. Engines running. Exhaust visible in the cool October air. As I watched, frozen in place like prey that knows it's been spotted, men in dark suits emerged from the vehicles. 1, 2, 5, 10, 15. They kept coming, unfolding from the SUVs like some kind of nightmare made flesh. Earpieces, tailored jackets that didn't quite hide the bulk of shoulder holsters, moving with the kind of synchronized precision that spoke of training and purpose. They moved toward my building entrance like a small army. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I backed away from the window, nearly tripping over my discarded shoes. The photos. Oh God, the photos. I had sent them to my cloud storage out of pure habit. The same automatic backup I did with every piece of research, every interview, every scrap of information I collected. If they were coming for the suitcase, they were definitely coming for me too. And if something happened to me, if these men decided I was a loose end that needed tying up, at least the information wouldn't disappear. At least someone might find it eventually. Heavy footsteps echoed in the stairwell, muffled but unmistakable. Multiple sets, climbing in perfect unison. Not the shuffling steps of tired residents returning home. These were purposeful. Inevitable. I looked at my apartment door, with its standard builder-grade lock and flimsy chain that wouldn't stop a determined teenager, let alone what sounded like a tactical team. Nothing I owned would slow down whoever was coming. I wasn't built for this. I wrote about corruption from the safety of coffee shops. I didn't confront it in my own living room. The footsteps grew louder, closer. 3rd floor, then 4th floor. My floor. I grabbed my phone and shoved it deep in my pocket, my only connection to the outside world and the evidence that might be my only bargaining chip. I pressed myself against the wall beside the door like I had seen people do in movies, as if that would somehow help, as if I had any chance against armed men who tracked their luggage with technology that probably cost more than my entire existence. The footsteps stopped outside my door. 3 sharp knocks. Not aggressive pounding or splintering wood. Almost polite. Controlled. Somehow that was infinitely worse than raw violence would have been. I held my breath, counting my heartbeats. Maybe if I stayed silent, they would think they had the wrong apartment. Maybe they would leave. Maybe this was all a terrible mistake. Another knock. Harder this time, rattling the frame. Then a voice cut through the door, low and controlled, with an accent that turned vowels into something dangerous and made my name sound like a verdict. Miss Williams. I know you're inside. I'm here for what belongs to me. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Didn't blink. I'm not interested in hurting you, the voice continued. And somehow I didn't believe him, even though his tone remained perfectly reasonable. But I will have a conversation with you, one way or another. You can open the door, or my men will open it for you. I think we both know which option is preferable. My voice came out smaller than I intended, barely more than a whisper. Who are you? Silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. Then, almost amused. The man whose suitcase you took from the airport. Now, open the door. I moved to the peephole on legs that felt disconnected from my body. One man stood directly in front of my door. Tall, maybe 6'2", wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe, including the shoes I never wore. Dark hair slicked back with precision. Sharp jawline with a faint scar running along the edge. The kind that spoke of violence survived. Ice blue eyes that seemed to look straight through the door and into me, cataloging every fear, every weakness. Behind him, I counted at least 15 other men lining the narrow hallway, all armed, all watching the door with the patience of predators who knew their prey had nowhere to run. My landlord was going to lose his absolute mind over this. If I survived long enough to care about noise complaints. I reached for the chain with shaking fingers, unhooked it, turned the deadbolt that suddenly seemed pathetically inadequate, opened the door exactly 6 inches. The man didn't force it wider, just stood there, studying me with those cold, calculating eyes that missed nothing. Up close, he was even more imposing. Broad shoulders, the kind of build that came from discipline and purpose, not vanity or gym selfies. He smelled like expensive cologne and something darker underneath. Gunpowder, maybe. Or just danger made manifest. Claire Williams? He asked, though the tone made it clear it wasn't really a question. He already knew. He knew everything. I nodded, not trusting my voice. My name is Vittorio Rossi. He paused, letting the name settle between us like a weight. You have something of mine, and we need to discuss exactly what you're going to do about that. Vittorio Rossi didn't wait for an invitation. He stepped into my apartment with the confidence of someone who owned every room he entered, his presence immediately making the space feel smaller, cheaper, more exposed. His men remained in the hallway, a wall of suits and weapons and silent judgment, but somehow having just him inside felt more dangerous than all of them combined. His ice blue eyes swept across my apartment in one efficient scan, taking in the secondhand furniture, the stack of unpaid bills on the counter, the Thai takeout container I hadn't thrown away. Nothing in his expression changed, but I felt the assessment anyway. Noted, catalogued, dismissed as irrelevant. Then his gaze landed on the open suitcase spread across my coffee table, documents still scattered like evidence at a crime scene. I can explain, I started, hating how my voice shook. I'm sure you can. He moved toward the table with measured steps, each footfall deliberate. The question is whether your explanation matters. I watched him gather the documents with careful hands, his movements precise and controlled. He didn't rush, didn't show anger or panic, just collected his property like a man who always got what he wanted, one way or another. When he finished, he turned to face me fully, and the weight of his attention made my breath catch. The suitcase was identical to mine, I said quickly. I didn't realize until I got home and opened it. I was going to call the airport, but it was late, and I couldn't get through to anyone, and then you showed up and you photographed my documents. It wasn't a question. His eyes had found my phone on the counter, the screen still lit up with my cloud storage app. Before you realized the mistake, before you saw the tracker, you saw information, and your first instinct was to document it. My stomach dropped. He knew. Of course he knew. Men like him always knew. I'm a journalist, I said, as if that explained everything. As if it excused anything. It's instinct. I see something that looks like a story and You investigate. He took a step closer, closing the distance between us. You ask questions. You dig into things that don't concern you. Things that are dangerous for people who ask too many questions. I backed up until my spine hit the wall. I'll delete them. The photos. All of them. You can watch me do it right now. I could. He tilted his head slightly, studying me like I was a problem he was trying to solve. But you've already uploaded them to cloud storage. Which means deleting them from your phone accomplishes nothing. You could have copies on your laptop, backup drives, email drafts. You could have already sent them to colleagues or editors or police. I didn't, I said quickly. I swear I didn't send them to anyone. It was just automatic backup. I do it with all my research. I wasn't thinking. That much is clear. He moved past me to my window, looking down at the street below where his SUVs waited like patient predators. You weren't thinking about who might own a suitcase containing sensitive documents. You weren't thinking about what kind of man travels with GPS tracking sewn into his luggage. You saw an opportunity, and you took it. Consequences be damned. The accuracy of his assessment stung more than any insult could have. So what happens now? You kill me? Make me disappear? My voice cracked on the last word. I'm nobody. I'm a freelance journalist who can barely pay rent. Nobody's going to care if That's where you're wrong. He turned from the window to face me again. You're a journalist. Which means if you disappear, especially after being seen at an airport where security cameras captured you taking my suitcase, there will be questions, investigations, the kind of attention I don't need and don't want. Hope flickered in my chest, small and desperate. So, you're not going to kill me. I didn't say that. His expression remained neutral, unreadable. I said it would be inconvenient. There's a difference. The hope died as quickly as it had sparked. He pulled out his phone, the device looking small in his large hand, and made a call. The conversation was brief, conducted in rapid Italian that I couldn't follow. When he finished, he returned his attention to me. My men are retrieving your actual suitcase from the airport. They'll bring it here. In the meantime, you and I are going to establish some ground rules. Ground rules, I repeated numbly. You have information I can't allow to be public. Information that could destroy carefully constructed arrangements, endanger lives, start wars. He said it matter-of-factly, like he was discussing the weather. I need to know that information stays contained, which means I need leverage over you. You have 15 armed men in my hallway, I pointed out. Seems like plenty of leverage. Violence is crude, temporary. Fear fades, courage returns, people get stupid. He moved to my couch and sat down like he owned it. Like he owned everything in this apartment, including me. I prefer insurance policies that don't require constant maintenance. I stayed pressed against the wall, trying to make sense of his words through the adrenaline flooding my system. What kind of insurance? The kind where you understand that those photos, that information, that curiosity of yours, exists in a context you don't want to be part of. He gestured to the space beside him. Sit down, Miss Williams. You're making me nervous hovering there like a frightened animal. The absurdity of that statement, that I could make him nervous, almost made me laugh, but I crossed to the chair across from the couch instead, maintaining distance. I wasn't that stupid. Better. He leaned back, somehow making my cheap furniture look elegant. Now, tell me what you saw in those documents. What did you understand? Account numbers, I said carefully. Wire transfers. Some names I didn't recognize. A senator's letterhead. It looked like financial records. Maybe evidence of corruption or money laundering. I didn't have time to analyze it properly before I found the tracker. But you wanted to. His eyes never left my face. You wanted to dig deeper, to investigate, to expose whatever you thought you'd found. I couldn't deny it. That's my job. Or it's supposed to be. I investigate corruption. I write stories that hold powerful people accountable. Noble. The word dripped with something that might have been mockery, or might have been respect. And suicidal, depending on which powerful people you're attempting to hold accountable. Are you threatening me? I'm educating you. He pulled out his own phone again, tapped the screen a few times, then held it toward me. Do you recognize this man? The photo showed someone in an expensive suit, leaving what looked like a courthouse. Distinguished, gray-haired, the kind of face that appeared on campaign posters and news programs. Senator Richardson, I said slowly. He's on some committee for financial oversight or banking regulation or something. Or something. Vittorio withdrew the phone. He's also dirty. Has been for 15 years. Takes money from organizations that have no business anywhere near legitimate government. Uses his position to protect criminal enterprises in exchange for offshore accounts and political support. I blinked. You're telling me this why? Because those documents you photographed prove it. Bank records, communications, transactions that connect him directly to people he should be arresting, not protecting. He paused. They also connect him to people who would very much like to see me dead. The pieces started falling into place. You're using evidence against him for something. Leverage or blackmail or protection, he corrected. I'm in a business that requires careful balance. Enemies on all sides, always looking for weaknesses to exploit. Senator Richardson provides certain assurances. As long as I have proof of his corruption, he stays compliant. Keeps certain agencies from looking too closely at certain operations, mutually beneficial arrangement, until I photographed everything and potentially destroyed that arrangement. I finished. Now you're understanding. He stood, moving to look out my window again. His phone buzzed and he answered it. Another brief conversation in Italian. When he hung up, his expression had shifted slightly, tension appearing in the line of his shoulders. We have a complication. My stomach dropped. What kind of complication? My men report that another organization was at the airport tonight, checking security footage, asking questions about the baggage carousel, specifically about our time frame. He turned to face me fully. They know the suitcase was switched, which means they know someone else has access to those documents. They're looking for that someone. Who are they? Competitors. Albanians who would very much like to eliminate my protection arrangements and take control of territory I currently hold. His jaw tightened. They saw you on the cameras, Miss Williams. They have your face. And they will find you much faster than I found my suitcase. Terror washed through me in a cold wave. What do they want? The documents. And to make sure no copies exist anywhere, which means eliminating anyone who's seen them. He said it clinically, without emotion. That would be you. Oh God. My legs felt weak. Oh God, this isn't happening. It is happening, and it's happening quickly. His phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen, and something that might have been satisfaction crossed his features. Your suitcase is here. My men are bringing it up. I heard heavy footsteps in the hall, then a knock. Vittorio opened the door, and one of his men entered carrying my actual suitcase, the one with the broken wheel that pulled left. The man set it down, nodded once to Vittorio, and retreated back to the hallway. Vittorio closed the door behind him. The space felt suddenly intimate, dangerous, charged with something I couldn't name. So now what? I asked. You have your suitcase, I have mine. We go our separate ways and pretend this never happened. Except the Albanians are already hunting you, he said quietly. They've connected you to me and to information they desperately want. Separating our paths doesn't eliminate that problem. It just means you face it alone. The implication hung in the air between us, heavy and inescapable. You're saying I need protection. I'm saying you're a target now, whether you want to be or not. The only question is whether you face what's coming with someone who can actually keep you alive, or whether you hide in this apartment and hope they don't find you. He moved closer, his presence overwhelming my senses. We both know how that hope would work out. I looked at him, at the cold calculation in his eyes that warred with something else, something almost like concern, and realized I was out of options. Had been since the moment I opened that suitcase. If I agree to protection, what does that cost me? Your cooperation, your silence, your word that those documents never see the light of day. He held out his hand, palm up, waiting. And your trust, at least temporarily, that keeping you alive serves my interests as much as yours. I stared at his outstretched hand. Strong fingers, a scar across the knuckles, calluses that spoke of violence lived and survived. Taking it meant stepping into a world I'd only ever written about from the outside, meant trusting a man I didn't know with a life I barely had control over. But the alternative was waiting here for men with worse intentions, and no reason to keep me breathing. I placed my hand in his. His grip was warm, firm, absolute. "Good choice, Miss Williams," Vittorio said softly. "Now pack a bag. We're leaving." I threw clothes into my duffel bag without thinking, grabbing whatever was closest. Jeans, shirts, underwear that had seen better days. My hands shook so badly I dropped my toothbrush twice before managing to zip the toiletry case. This was insane. I was packing to leave with a man I'd met 20 minutes ago, a man who traveled with armed escorts and GPS-tracked luggage and talked about territorial wars like other people discuss traffic. Vittorio stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in low Italian that sounded like commands. His men had retreated slightly down the hallway, but I could still feel their presence. A constant reminder that normal life had ended the moment I grabbed the wrong suitcase. "How long will I need to be gone?" I asked, shoving my laptop into the bag. "As long as it takes to neutralize the threat." He ended his call and turned to face me. "A few days, maybe longer. I have work. Deadlines. Not that they pay much, but I can't just disappear." "You can, and you will." His tone left no room for argument. "Unless you'd prefer to stay here and see how long it takes the Albanians to find you. I estimate 6 hours. Maybe less if they're motivated." I zipped the bag closed with more force than necessary. "You know, your reassurance skills could use some work." Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. There and gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "I prefer honesty over comfort. Comfort gets people killed." "Fantastic life philosophy," I muttered, slinging the bag over my shoulder. He moved to the door, opened it slightly, and spoke to one of his men in Italian. The man nodded and disappeared down the stairs. Vittorio returned his attention to me. "My car is being brought to the back entrance. We'll exit through the basement service door. Less exposure. You've done this before." It wasn't a question. "Moving valuable assets from dangerous situations?" He held my gaze. "More times than I can count." The word asset sat wrong in my chest, but I didn't have time to examine why. We moved into the hallway where his men waited, silent and efficient. They formed a loose perimeter around us as we descended the stairs, their eyes constantly scanning, hands near weapons I tried not to look at directly. The basement smelled like mildew and old concrete, lit by a single flickering bulb that cast everything in sickly yellow. Vittorio's hand found the small of my back, guiding me toward a door I'd never noticed in the 3 years I'd lived here. One of his men pushed it open, checked the alley beyond, then nodded. We stepped out into October night air that cut through my jacket. A black SUV idled near the dumpsters, exhaust visible in the cold. The same man who'd brought my suitcase opened the back door, and Vittorio gestured for me to enter first. The interior smelled like leather, and that expensive cologne Vittorio wore. I slid across the seat and he followed, the door closing with a heavy thunk that felt final. 2 of his men climbed into the front. The driver pulled out of the alley smoothly. No squealing tires or dramatic acceleration, just steady movement through Brooklyn streets that looked different through tinted windows. "Where are we going?" I asked, watching my neighborhood disappear behind us. "Hamptons. I have a property there that's secure." Vittorio was already on his phone again, typing something with quick, precise movements. "It'll take about 3 hours with current traffic patterns." 3 hours trapped in a car with a man whose last name I'd learned less than an hour ago. Perfect. I leaned my head against the window and tried to process the reality of my situation. This morning I'd been worried about rent. Now I was fleeing from Albanian mobsters with a man who probably wasn't much better. We'd been driving for maybe 20 minutes when I heard it. A dull boom that rattled the windows, distant but unmistakable. I twisted in my seat to look back through the rear window. An orange glow lit up the skyline behind us, roughly where my building would be, growing brighter, spreading. "What the hell was that?" I whispered. Vittorio had already turned to look, his jaw tightening. Explosion. Ground level or just above from the size of it. He barked something in Italian to the driver, then placed a call. The conversation was sharp, urgent. Questions fired faster than answers could form. My apartment. That was my apartment building. That orange glow was my home. My neighbors. Everything I owned that I hadn't shoved into this duffel bag. They hit my building. My voice came out hollow, disconnected from my body. They actually blew up my building. Not the building. Your floor specifically, or near it. Vittorio's voice was clinical, analyzing. They wanted to eliminate you and any evidence you might have had. Files, computers, backup drives. Burn it all. There are other people in that building. Families, kids. My hands clenched into fists. They could have killed. That's not their concern. He ended his call and turned to face me fully. My men are reporting that emergency services are responding. The explosion was contained to your floor and the one below. There will be injuries, probably fatalities, but it could have been worse. Could have been worse. As if that made it acceptable. As if people weren't bleeding or dying or losing everything because I'd taken the wrong suitcase from an airport carousel. This is my fault, I said quietly. If you hadn't, they would have found another excuse. Vittorio's hand moved as if to touch my shoulder, then stopped. These people don't need justification for violence. They need targets and opportunities. You became both the moment you took that suitcase, but the violence itself? That's who they are. I wanted to argue, to push back against the absolution he was offering, but my brain couldn't form coherent thoughts. I just stared out the window at highway lights blurring past, while my old life burned behind me. The drive stretched into silence, broken only by Vittorio's periodic phone calls, each one clipped and efficient. He was coordinating something, moving pieces on a board I couldn't see. Occasionally he would relay information in English, probably for my benefit. The explosion had been a targeted strike, using a device planted in my apartment during the day, before I'd even returned from Boston. The Albanians had been planning this the moment they discovered the suitcase switch. His men were tracking their movements now, mapping their safe houses and operating patterns. War was coming. I'd just thrown the first match without even knowing it. We crossed into Long Island, leaving the city lights behind for stretches of darkness interrupted by occasional towns. The further we drove, the more my shock transformed into something harder, sharper. Anger, maybe. Or determination. My building was destroyed. My neighbors were hurt. All because I'd been collateral damage in someone else's battle. Tell me about them, I said suddenly, breaking the silence. The Albanians. What do they want? Vittorio studied me for a long moment before answering. Territory. Money. Power. The usual motivations. He paused. They've been trying to move into areas my organization controls for the past year. Distribution routes, protection contracts, political connections. Every attempt has failed because I have resources they don't. Insurance. Leverage. The documents, I said. Among other things. He shifted slightly, his arm resting along the back of the seat. They know I have proof of Senator Richardson's corruption. They know that proof keeps him compliant, keeps law enforcement at a distance. If they could eliminate that insurance and expose the senator themselves, they'd remove my protection while gaining their own. So those documents are worth killing for. Those documents are worth starting a war for. He said it like it was obvious, like I should have understood this from the beginning. Which is why you having copies, even accidentally, made you the most dangerous person in New York tonight. I turned to face him fully, studying his profile in the dim light from passing street lamps. Sharp features, that scar along his jaw, the kind of face that belonged to old Italian paintings of warriors and kings. You could have killed me, destroyed my phone, wiped my cloud storage, made me disappear. It would have been simpler. Simpler isn't always better. His ice blue eyes found mine. You're a journalist, Miss Williams. You ask questions. You investigate. You expose truth. Those are dangerous skills in my world. But they're also valuable, especially when pointed in the right direction. You want me to investigate something. Understanding clicked into place. That's why you're keeping me alive. Not out of mercy or because it's inconvenient to kill me. You think I'm useful. I think, he said slowly, choosing words carefully, that you stumbled into a situation much larger than a simple suitcase mix-up. And I think that situation might require exactly the kind of skills you possess. He leaned forward slightly. But first, we need to keep you breathing long enough to use them. The SUV turned off the main highway onto smaller roads, then through gates that opened automatically at our approach. A long driveway stretched ahead, lined with trees that looked ancient in the headlights. Then the house appeared. Calling it a house was like calling the ocean a puddle. 3 stories of stone and glass, lit from within, perched on what looked like private beachfront. "This is your idea of secure?" I asked, staring at the mansion. 12-foot walls surrounding the entire property. Armed guards rotating in 8-hour shifts. Surveillance covering every approach. Safe room in the basement with independent power and communications. He rattled off security measures like someone else might list amenities. Also, it's registered under a shell corporation that takes 6 weeks to trace back to me. Yes, Miss Williams, this is secure. The SUV stopped in front of massive doors that looked like they belonged on a cathedral. More men in suits emerged from the shadows, speaking rapidly to Vittorio in Italian. He responded while climbing out, then turned back to offer me his hand. I ignored it and climbed out myself, clutching my duffel bag like it was the last piece of my old life. Which, given the explosion, it might actually be. The interior of the house matched the exterior's grandeur. Marble floors, artwork that looked original and priceless, furniture that probably cost more than I'd earned in my entire career. Everything was elegant, expensive, designed to impress and intimidate in equal measure. A woman appeared from one of the hallways, older, dressed simply but with the bearing of someone used to authority. She spoke to Vittorio in Italian, gesturing toward the upper floors. He nodded and turned to me. "Lucia will show you to a guest room. There's a bathroom attached, everything you should need. Try to get some rest." He was already moving toward what looked like an office, phone back at his ear, slipping into his role like armor. Wait, I didn't know what I wanted to say, just that the thought of being alone in this massive house made my chest tight. What happens tomorrow? He paused in the doorway, backlit by office lights. "Tomorrow we figure out how to keep you alive, and how to use what you know to end this before more people die." His eyes met mine across the distance. "Tomorrow, Miss Williams, we go to war." Then he was gone, and Lucia was leading me up a curved staircase to a bedroom that could have fit my entire apartment twice over. She said something in Italian I didn't understand, smiled kindly, and left me alone. I dropped my bag on a bed that looked too perfect to actually sleep in, and walked to the window. Below, I could see guards patrolling the grounds, dark figures moving through carefully maintained gardens. Beyond them, the ocean stretched black and endless under a moonless sky. Somewhere out there, men were hunting me. My home was destroyed. My life as I knew it had ended in the time it took to grab the wrong suitcase, and the only thing standing between me and death was a man whose last name meant nothing to me this morning, but now felt like the only solid thing in a world gone insane. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass and tried not to think about the orange glow I'd seen in my rearview mirror. Tried not to count the ways this could still go wrong. Failed on both counts. Morning arrived through unfamiliar windows, sunlight cutting across a bed too large and too comfortable to belong to my reality. For 3 blessed seconds I forgot where I was, forgot why my chest felt tight and my thoughts scattered. Then memory crashed back, and I was sitting upright, heart hammering, reaching for a phone that showed 6 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize, and a news alert about an explosion in Brooklyn that had injured 14 people and killed 2. 2 people dead because I'd taken the wrong suitcase. I showered in a bathroom larger than my destroyed bedroom, using products that probably cost more than my grocery budget, trying to scrub away the guilt that clung to my skin like smoke. It didn't work. The woman in the mirror looked like me, but felt like someone else. Someone who'd crossed a line she couldn't uncross. Lucia found me wandering the hallway 20 minutes later, still damp-haired and disoriented. She smiled kindly and gestured for me to follow, leading me through corridors that felt designed to confuse, past rooms I glimpsed but couldn't catalog, until we reached a dining room with windows overlooking the ocean. Vittorio sat at the far end of a table that could seat 20, laptop open, phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid Italian that sounded like he was issuing orders rather than having a conversation. He glanced up when I entered, held up one finger in a wait gesture, and continued talking. Lucia set a plate in front of me, eggs and toast and fruit arranged with care I didn't deserve, then disappeared as silently as she'd arrived. I picked at the food while Vittorio finished his call. He looked different in morning light, less like a figure from a nightmare, and more like a man who simply happened to be very good at dangerous things. His suit was different from last night, but equally perfect. His hair still precisely styled despite the early hour. Only the faint shadows under his eyes suggested he'd slept as poorly as I had. "You should eat," he said, closing his laptop. "It's going to be a long day. 2 people are dead." I set down my fork. "Because of me. Because of the Albanians," he corrected. "You didn't plant that explosive. You didn't make the choice to kill civilians to send a message. They did. Semantics." I pushed the plate away. "If I hadn't taken your suitcase, then they would have found another excuse to escalate." He stood and moved to pour coffee from a carafe I hadn't noticed. "This war was coming regardless. You just happened to be the catalyst. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong suitcase." He set a cup in front of me, the coffee dark and strong. Exactly what I needed. That's supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to make you understand the reality you're operating in now. He sat down closer to me than the massive table required. Guilt is useless here. Productive anger, however, is valuable. I took a long drink of coffee, letting the heat burn away some of the numbness. "You want to use my anger. I want to use your skills." He opened his laptop again, turned it so I could see the screen. Documents filled the display. The same ones I'd photographed last night, plus others I hadn't seen. "You're a journalist who investigates corruption. Well, here's more corruption than you could expose in a lifetime. Senator Richardson is just the surface." I found myself leaning forward despite my better judgment, eyes scanning the information. Account numbers, shell corporations, transactions spanning years. Names I recognized from news reports, faces I'd seen on television. Evidence of a network that went deeper than I'd imagined. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked carefully. "Because the Albanians don't just want these documents to eliminate my leverage. They want them to take Richardson's place in the arrangement." Vittorio zoomed in on a specific transaction chain. "They've been building their own insurance policy, gathering their own evidence, planning to expose the senator publicly while offering themselves as alternative partners to the people he was protecting. So they destroy your protection while gaining their own." I followed the logic. That's actually smart. It's brilliant. He didn't sound upset about it, just analytical, which is why it can't succeed. I looked up from the screen to find him watching me. Those ice-blue eyes measuring, calculating. "What do you need from me?" "Your expertise, your journalist's eye for patterns and connections." He pulled up another file, this one showing a map with locations marked. "I need to know how they're building their case, where the vulnerabilities are, how to dismantle their strategy before they can execute it. You want me to investigate them." Understanding settled cold in my stomach. "To use my skills to help you win a mob war. I want you to survive." He closed the laptop. "And survival means ending this threat permanently. You can't go back to your old life, Miss Williams. That apartment is gone. Those neighbors know your face from news reports about the explosion. The Albanians know who you are and what you've seen. Your only path forward is through this situation, not around it." The truth of his words sat heavy in my chest. "So I help you, or I spend the rest of my life running. Or you help me, and you get something valuable in return." He leaned back in his chair. "A story. The biggest expose on political corruption you'll ever write. Evidence that could bring down not just a senator, but an entire network of corrupt officials. Your name on the byline, your career resurrected, your credibility established beyond question." It was tempting. God, it was tempting. Everything I'd wanted, everything I'd been chasing with my failed pitches and rejected articles, handed to me on a silver platter soaked in blood. "And all I have to do is help you destroy your enemies first," I said. "All you have to do is tell me what you see in these files that I might be missing." He opened the laptop again. "I know numbers and operations. You know stories and how to tell them. Different perspectives, Miss Williams. That's all I'm asking for." We worked through the morning, Vittorio bringing up documents while I analyzed them with fresh eyes. He was right. I did see things he missed. patterns in the transactions that suggested money laundering schemes more sophisticated than simple wire transfers, names that connected to journalists and media outlets, potential plants for when the Albanians wanted to leak their own evidence, a timeline that indicated they were planning something big within the next 2 weeks. "They're moving fast," I said, pointing to a series of dates. "Whatever their endgame is, it's coming soon. They want to strike before you can reinforce your position." Vittorio's jaw tightened. "Which means we have less time than I thought." Lunch came and went. More food I barely tasted while we dug deeper into the files. Vittorio made calls in Italian, occasionally putting me on speaker to share something I'd discovered, his men responding with information that painted a clearer picture of the Albanian operation. They were larger than I'd realized, better funded, with connections that stretched into legitimate business and government. "How do you fight something this big?" I asked during a rare pause. "The same way you expose corruption in journalism." He was reviewing notes on a legal pad, his handwriting precise and controlled. "Find the weak points. Apply pressure. Watch everything collapse from the inside. Except your version involves actual violence, not just ruined careers. Sometimes." He didn't look up from his notes. "Violence is a tool, not the goal. The goal is stability. Territory secured, operations protected, wars ended before they spread. That's a very corporate way to describe organized crime," I observed. "That's because it is corporate." He set down his pen and met my gaze. Different products, different methods, same fundamental structure. Supply and demand, risk management, competitive strategy. I run a business, Miss Williams. It just happens to operate outside legal boundaries. And people die in your business. People die in every business. His expression didn't change. Arms manufacturers, pharmaceutical companies, banks that foreclose on families. Death is everywhere. I'm just more honest about my role in it. I wanted to argue, to push back against the moral equivalence, but I'd spent enough time investigating corporate corruption to know he wasn't entirely wrong. The legal world had plenty of blood on its hands, just better public relations. We were deep into analyzing a shell corporation's transaction history when Vittorio's phone rang with a tone I hadn't heard before, urgent and sharp. He answered in Italian, his whole body going tense. The conversation was brief, clipped, ending with what sounded like a command. He stood abruptly. "We have a situation. The Albanians know about this property. They're planning something for tonight." Ice flooded my veins. "How do they know?" "Money, probably. Someone on my security team, or someone with access to property records." He was already moving toward the door. "It doesn't matter how. What matters is that we're reinforcing the perimeter and preparing for potential assault." Assault. I followed him into the hallway. "As in they're going to attack this house?" "They're going to try." He stopped and turned to face me fully. "Which is why you're going to stay in the secure room downstairs until this is resolved. Lucia will take you there now." "Wait." I grabbed his arm without thinking, felt the solid muscle beneath expensive fabric. "What are you going to do?" "My job." He looked down at my hand on his arm, then back to my face. "Protect what's mine and eliminate threats. Standard procedure, Miss Williams." "Claire," I said suddenly, "if I'm staying in your house, hiding in your secure room while people try to kill us both, you should probably call me Claire." Something shifted in his expression, the cold calculation warming fractionally. "Claire." He said my name like he was testing it, seeing how it fit. "Stay in the secure room until I come for you personally. Don't open the door for anyone else, even if they say I sent them." "Understood?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. He reached up and covered my hand with his, the contact brief but deliberate. "I've kept more important things safe with worse odds. You'll be fine." Then Lucia was there, urgency in her movements as she guided me toward the stairs. I looked back once to see Vittorio already on his phone, commanding in Italian while men in suits materialized from rooms I hadn't known existed, all of them armed, all of them moving with purpose. The secure room was exactly what he'd described: reinforced walls, independent power, monitors showing every angle of the property. Lucia showed me the supplies, the communications equipment, the panic button that would summon immediate response. Then she squeezed my shoulder with surprising gentleness and left, the heavy door sealing behind her with a sound like a vault closing. I sat on the cot provided and watched the monitors as Vittorio's men took positions around the property. Watched as he stood in what looked like a command center, coordinating with calm efficiency. Watched as the sun began setting over the ocean, turning everything gold and red like the world was already burning. And I waited for the war to come find us. 3 days passed without attack. 3 days of waiting in luxury that felt increasingly like a cage, no matter how gilded. The Albanian assault never materialized. Or if it did, Vittorio's security intercepted it before it reached the property. He wouldn't tell me which. Just appeared each evening to inform me the threat remained active. That I needed to stay inside. That patience was required. Patience. As if I had any choice. I spent the time doing what I did best. Digging through the files he'd given me access to. Building timelines and connections. Writing analysis that looked like journalism, but served his war. The work kept my hands busy, and my mind focused on something other than the 2 dead neighbors whose names I'd learned from news reports. Sarah Chen, 63, retired teacher. Marcus Wright, 37, bartender with a 6-year-old daughter. Their blood was on my hands whether Vittorio's logic absolved me or not. On the 4th evening, I found him in his study, rather than him finding me. The door was open, warm light spilling into the hallway, and through it I could see him at his desk. Jacket discarded, sleeves rolled to his elbows, reading something on his laptop with the kind of focus that made the rest of the world disappear. I knocked on the door frame. "Do you ever sleep?" He looked up, surprise flickering across his features before control reasserted itself. "Occasionally. Do you?" "Not well." I stepped into the study, drawn by curiosity and something else I didn't want to name. "I've been going through the Albanian financial records. I think I found something." Interest sharpened his gaze. "Show me." I moved around his desk, pulled up the file on his laptop, pointing to the transactions I'd flagged. "Here. These patterns don't match their other operations. The amounts are too specific, too regular. It's not drug money or protection payments." "What is it?" He leaned closer to study the screen, close enough that I could smell his cologne mixed with coffee and exhaustion. "Payroll, I think, for something consistent and ongoing." I traced the dates. Every 2 weeks like clockwork. Started 6 months ago and hasn't stopped. That's not how criminal enterprises usually operate. Too predictable. Unless they're paying for something legitimate that requires consistent funding. His eyes tracked the numbers with frightening speed. "How many recipients?" "At least 30 that I can confirm. Probably more if I had access to their full network." I pulled up another file. "And look at this. Several of these accounts belong to people with government positions. Low-level clerks, administrative assistants, but all of them work in offices that handle sensitive information." Understanding dawned across his face. They've embedded people. Not corrupting existing officials, but placing their own. A slow infiltration rather than a quick takeover. I felt the familiar thrill of uncovering something hidden. It's smarter than what Richardson was doing. Instead of compromising people in power, they're creating a network from the ground up. Vittorio sat back in his chair, fingers steepled against his lips. This changes everything. If they have people inside the infrastructure, they don't need to expose Richardson to gain protection. They can simply wait until their network is strong enough and eliminate all of us simultaneously. How long until that happens? Months. Maybe a year. He was already calculating, planning. But it means the immediate threat might be lower than we thought. They're playing a longer game. Relief and frustration warred in my chest. "So I can leave? Go back to some version of normal? Where would you go?" His question was gentle but merciless. "Your apartment is destroyed. Your neighbors know your face from every news report about the explosion. The Albanians might be playing long-term strategy, but they won't forget you exist. And even if they did, you've seen everything in these files. You know too much to ever truly be safe." I moved to the window, staring out at ocean darkness that offered no answers. "So what then? I stay here forever? Hide in your mansion while you fight wars I helped start? You didn't start anything." I heard him stand, felt him move closer. "But you're right that staying here isn't sustainable. You need purpose beyond analyzing my documents. You need a life. Can't have much of a life when I'm a target." My reflection in the glass looked hollow, unfamiliar. Then we eliminate the target. His reflection appeared beside mine. We use what you've discovered to dismantle their operation before it becomes unstoppable. We expose the network you found, burn their people out of government positions, destroy their long-term strategy. I turned to face him. And how exactly do we do that? The same way you wanted to expose Richardson. Something shifted in his expression. Calculation mixing with what might have been respect. You write the story. Everything you've discovered. Every connection you've mapped. Every piece of evidence I can provide. You publish it through legitimate channels, destroy them with truth instead of violence. Hope flickered dangerously in my chest. You said I could never publish anything from these files, that the information had to stay buried. I said you couldn't publish information that destroyed my leverage over Richardson. He moved closer. Close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. But this Albanian network is separate. Exposing it hurts them without touching my arrangements. In fact, it strengthens my position by eliminating future competition. So you'd let me publish? I searched his face for deception. Actually, let me do my job? Under specific conditions. He held up a hand, counting off fingers. First, nothing that compromises Richardson or my existing operations. Second, you submit the article to me for review before publication. Third, your byline goes on a story that makes you famous, but keeps my name out of it entirely. Control the narrative. I said slowly. Make sure I expose exactly what serves your interests. Make sure we both get what we need. He lowered his hand. You get the career-defining story you've been chasing. I get a competing organization destroyed without firing a shot. Mutually beneficial, Claire. It was manipulation. Obviously, transparently manipulation. But it was also exactly what I wanted, what I'd been working toward my entire career. A story that mattered. Evidence that couldn't be denied. My name attached to something that would change things. Even if the reasons behind it were anything but pure. What if I say no? I asked. What if I decide I don't want to be your weapon? Then you stay here under protection until I find another solution to the Albanian problem. No threat in his tone. Just statement of fact. You'd be safe, comfortable, but ultimately useless. I don't think that's what you want. He was right, and we both knew it. Useless was worse than compromised. Hiding was worse than fighting, even if the fight served someone else's agenda. If I do this, I said carefully, I write it my way. No censorship beyond protecting your operations. No forcing me to lie or distort facts. The story has to be real, has to be true, or it's worthless. Agreed. He extended his hand. You write truth. I ensure that truth serves us both. Partnership, not puppetry. I looked at his outstretched hand, strong and scarred and steady. Shaking it meant committing to something that went beyond simple survival, meant becoming an active participant in his world rather than an accidental victim of it, meant choosing him, in whatever complicated way that choice manifested. I took his hand. His grip was warm, firm, absolute. Partnership, I echoed. Good. He didn't release my hand immediately. Now comes the difficult part. Convincing editors to publish a story sourced from anonymous intelligence without revealing where that intelligence came from. I can do that. Professional confidence steadied my voice. I've built credibility over years. Editors trust my research even when I can't reveal sources. Then we start tomorrow. He finally released my hand, the absence of contact somehow louder than its presence. Tonight you should rest. Actually rest, not lie awake analyzing files until dawn. I could say the same to you. I gestured at his desk, the organized chaos of documents and empty coffee cups. You look like you haven't slept properly in days. I haven't. He moved back to his desk, already reaching for his laptop like the brief moment of connection had never happened. But sleep is negotiable when wars hang in the balance. So is perspective. I don't know what made me brave enough to step closer again. You told me guilt is useless. Doesn't exhaustion fall into the same category? He paused, fingers hovering over keys. Are you actually concerned about my sleep schedule? Or is this strategic questioning? Can't it be both? I moved to lean against his desk, forcing him to acknowledge my presence. You need me sharp and functional for this partnership to work, which means you need to be equally sharp and functional. Basic logic, Vittorio. His name felt strange in my mouth, intimate in a way his surname hadn't been. From his expression, he noticed. Basic logic. He repeated slowly. And here I thought you were developing actual concern for my well-being. Maybe I am. The admission surprised me as much as it seemed to surprise him. You've kept me alive when it would have been easier to eliminate me. You're offering me a way forward instead of just protection. That deserves something more than cold pragmatism in return. Silence stretched between us, heavy with things neither of us knew how to articulate. He looked at me like he was solving an equation that kept changing variables. Like I was a problem he couldn't quite categorize. You're dangerous, he said finally, quietly. Not because of what you know or what you can expose. Because you make me consider things beyond strategy and survival. My heart kicked against my ribs. Is that bad? I don't know yet. He stood, closing the distance between us, until I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. In my world, anything that makes you vulnerable is usually fatal, but you're already making me rethink rules I've followed for years. What rules? The question came out breathier than intended. One's about keeping assets at emotional distance, about not confusing protection with possession. His hand lifted as if to touch my face, then stopped halfway. About not wanting things I can't afford to want. And what do you want? I barely recognized my own voice. His ice blue eyes darkened. Right now? To kiss you. To forget about Albanian networks and political corruption and war strategies long enough to taste your mouth and feel something real. The air between us crackled with tension I'd been ignoring for days. So why don't you? Because once I start, I won't want to stop. His control was slipping, visible in the tension of his jaw, the tightness of his shoulders. And you deserve better than being another thing I take because I can. Maybe I want to be taken. The words escaped before wisdom could stop them. Maybe I'm tired of being protected and analyzed and kept at arm's length like I'm something fragile. You are something fragile. But his hand finally moved, fingers tracing my jawline with devastating gentleness. You're also something fierce and brilliant, and so far outside my usual experience, I don't have protocols for handling you. Then stop handling me. I leaned into his touch. And just be with me. No strategy, no protocols, no thinking 5 moves ahead. His thumb brushed across my lower lip. You're asking me to abandon everything that's kept me alive this long. I'm asking you to trust that maybe, for once, being vulnerable won't kill you. I reached up to cover his hand with mine. Or maybe I'm asking you to trust me. Same thing, really. He kissed me. Finally. Inevitably. Like gravity had been pulling us toward this moment since he'd stood in my apartment doorway with ice in his eyes and violence at his back. His mouth was fierce and hungry, tasting like coffee and something darker. Something that felt like need he'd been denying too long. I kissed him back with equal hunger, fingers threading through his precisely styled hair, messing it up in ways that felt like small victories. He pulled me flush against him, and I went willingly, desperately, needing the contact like I needed air. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. This complicates everything, he said. I know. I smiled despite myself, but I don't think I care. You should. But he kissed me again anyway. Softer this time, like he was memorizing the taste. We both should. Probably. I pulled back just enough to meet his gaze. But we won't. Because complicated is apparently where we both live now. Something that might have been a laugh escaped him. You truly are dangerous, Claire Williams. Good. I kissed the corner of his mouth. Someone needs to keep you on your toes. He held me there against his desk, in his study, in his mansion that was both sanctuary and prison. And for the first time since grabbing the wrong suitcase, I felt like something other than a victim or an asset. I felt like a person, complicated, confused, possibly making terrible decisions, but undeniably, recklessly alive, even if I wasn't sure either of us would survive whatever came next. The next week passed in a strange rhythm of domesticity and dread. Mornings working on the expose. Afternoons with Vittorio reviewing strategy. Evenings that blurred into something I didn't have words for. We didn't talk about what had happened in his study. Didn't analyze or define, or put labels on the way his hand found mine during meetings. or the way I'd started appearing at his door when nightmares woke me at 3 a.m. We just existed in the space between professional partnership and something infinitely more complicated. I was writing in the library, 8th draft of the opening paragraph, when Vittorio appeared in the doorway with an expression I'd learned meant trouble, not immediate danger, but the kind of problem that required rapid adjustment. "The Albanians know about the article," he said without preamble. "One of their embedded contacts intercepted communication between you and your editor." My stomach dropped. "How much do they know? Enough to understand what you're planning to expose? Enough to want you dead before publication." He moved into the room, tension visible in his shoulders. "They're accelerating their timeline, planning to hit this location within the next 48 hours with enough force to overwhelm our security." I saved my document with shaking hands. "How many?" "Intelligence suggests 30 to 40 men. Well-armed, well-coordinated." He was already on his phone, texting rapid commands. "More than we can repel without significant casualties." "So we leave." I stood, mind already cataloging what I'd need to pack. Find another location they don't know about. They'll find the next one too. They have resources and motivation. He looked up from his phone, ice blue eyes meeting mine with something that might have been regret. "Running just delays the inevitable. At some point, we have to end this. End it how?" But I already knew. Had known since the first night, really. This was always going to come down to violence. "I draw them here. Let them think they have the advantage." His voice was calm, clinical. The voice of a man who'd planned battles before. "We fortify our position, prepare for siege warfare, and eliminate their leadership when they commit to the assault." "You're talking about a war, an actual battle on your property." I moved closer, needing to see his face clearly. "People are going to die. Yes. No hesitation, no false comfort. Theirs, if we execute properly. Possibly some of mine. That's the cost of ending this permanently rather than running forever." I thought of Sarah Chen and Marcus Wright, of the orange glow in my rearview mirror, of every consequence that had spiraled from one wrong suitcase. And me? "Where do I fit in your battle plan?" "Secure room, same as before." His hand found my shoulder, grip firm and grounding. "You stay locked down until it's over. No negotiation on this, Claire. You're the target they want most, which makes you the one person who absolutely cannot be exposed during the assault. I'm also the person who started this. The guilt I'd been managing threatened to surface. I should at least... You should stay alive." His other hand came up to frame my face, forcing me to meet his gaze. "That's your job in this. Survive. Let me handle the rest. I don't like being helpless. You're not helpless. You're protected." He kissed my forehead, brief and fierce. "There's a difference." That was how I ended up back in the secure room 12 hours later, watching darkness fall through security monitors while Vittorio's men transformed the mansion into a fortress. Barricades appeared at entry points, weapons were distributed with frightening efficiency, and Vittorio himself moved through it all like a conductor orchestrating a symphony of potential violence. I tried to focus on my laptop, on the article that had triggered this escalation, but my eyes kept drifting to the monitors. To Vittorio coordinating with his lieutenants, his calm authority somehow more frightening than panic would have been. This was a man who'd done this before, who knew exactly how to prepare for people trying to kill him, who might die tonight protecting me and the information I'd uncovered. Lucia brought dinner at 8, soup and bread I couldn't taste. She squeezed my hand and said something in Italian that sounded like prayer before sealing me back inside. The vault door closed with that same terrible finality, and I was alone with my thoughts, and too many screens showing too many angles of a property about to become a battlefield. The attack came at midnight. No warning, no preliminary shots, just sudden explosive force that rocked the entire building. The East Wing security feed went static, replaced by orange glow that looked sickeningly familiar. They'd started with bombs, softening defenses before the main assault. Gunfire erupted across multiple monitors simultaneously. Muzzle flashes in the darkness, shadows moving with purpose through gardens I'd walked through yesterday. The Albanians came in 3 waves, overwhelming force designed to breach the perimeter through sheer numbers. Vittorio's men held position with practiced discipline, returning fire from fortified positions, forcing the attackers to advance through killing zones. I watched men fall on both sides, dark shapes that stopped moving, and had to remind myself to breathe through the horror. This was real. This was happening because of me. On the central monitor showing the main command center, I could see Vittorio directing the defense, phone pressed to his ear while studying tactical displays. His suit jacket was gone, sleeves rolled up, gun visible in a shoulder holster he hadn't been wearing earlier. He looked dangerous in ways that should have terrified me, but instead made my chest tight with something that felt dangerously close to fear of losing him. The second explosion took out the west perimeter wall, and suddenly there were men flooding onto the property from multiple angles. Too many, too coordinated, pushing past outer defenses with calculated aggression. Vittorio barked orders I couldn't hear, and his men adjusted positions, falling back to secondary defensive lines. They were being overrun. Despite preparation, despite fortification, despite everything, there were simply too many attackers. I watched Vittorio grab his own weapon and move toward the main entry hall, watched him take position with his men rather than directing from relative safety. He was fighting alongside them, protecting his home and his people and me with his own hands. The monitor showing the secure room hallway flickered with movement. 3 Albanian fighters had breached interior defenses, moving toward my location with clear purpose. They knew where I was, knew exactly where the secure room sat. My heart hammered against my ribs as they reached the vault door. One pulled out what looked like cutting equipment, industrial grade, designed for exactly this kind of barrier. The door that was supposed to keep me safe suddenly felt like a tomb. On another monitor, I saw Vittorio notice the interior breach, saw him break from his position and run toward the basement stairs, shouting into his phone. 2 of his men followed, but they were dealing with their own attackers, couldn't provide immediate support. He was coming for me, through a battlefield, through people trying to kill him. He was coming because I was down here and in danger. The cutting equipment sparked against the vault door, white-hot and relentless, maybe 2 minutes before they breached. Maybe less. Vittorio appeared on the hallway monitor, coming around the corner at a dead run. The 3 Albanians heard him, turned, weapons rising. He didn't slow down, just fired twice with precision that spoke of training. I hadn't fully understood until this moment. 2 men dropped. The third returned fire, and Vittorio dove behind a support column, pinned down 10 feet from my door, while the 3rd Albanian continued working on the cutting equipment. I couldn't do nothing. Couldn't sit here watching while he fought alone. The secure room had a weapons locker, emergency provisions for exactly this scenario. My hands shook as I opened it, finding a handgun I barely knew how to use, and a fire extinguisher that might work as a weapon if I was desperate enough, which I absolutely was. The vault door shuddered as cutting equipment made progress, a thin line of light appearing along the seal. 30 seconds. Maybe less. On the monitor, Vittorio was exchanging fire with the 3rd Albanian, neither able to advance without exposing themselves. A standoff that would end badly the moment the vault door opened and I became the easier target. I grabbed the fire extinguisher, positioned myself beside the door, and waited. Every second stretched infinite. Every breath felt like it might be my last. The vault door swung open with a mechanical groan. The Albanian stepped through, weapon raised, scanning for me. I swung the fire extinguisher with everything I had, connecting with his shoulder hard enough to throw off his aim. His shot went wide, hitting concrete instead of flesh. Vittorio appeared in the doorway behind him, no hesitation, putting 2 rounds center mass before the man could recover. The Albanian collapsed, and suddenly Vittorio was there, hands on my shoulders, eyes wild with something between fury and terror. "Are you insane?" His voice was raw. "You could have been killed. So could you." I was shaking so hard my teeth rattled. "I saw you on the monitors. You came alone." "I came because you're down here." His grip tightened. "Because leaving you unprotected was unacceptable. So is letting you die protecting me." The words tumbled out unchecked. "Do you understand that? You can't die. I can't watch you die." Something in his expression cracked. "Claire." Gunfire echoed from upstairs, closer now. He tensed, calculating. "We need to move. This position is compromised." He pulled me into the hallway, keeping his body between me and potential threats. Weapon raised and ready. We moved through corridors I barely recognized, past bodies I tried not to look at, toward a back exit I hadn't known existed. Outside, the property was chaos. Fires burning, men still fighting in pockets across the grounds, the sharp crack of gunfire mixing with shouted commands in multiple languages. Vittorio guided me toward the tree line where 2 of his men waited with a vehicle. "Get her to the secondary location," he ordered in English, probably for my benefit. "Don't stop. Don't deviate. Don't trust anyone. Wait." I grabbed his arm. "You're not coming? I need to finish this." He looked back at the mansion, at the battle still raging. "My men are still fighting. I won't abandon them." "Then I'm not leaving either." I held my ground despite the terror screaming at me to run. "We're partners, remember? That means we don't abandon each other. Partners don't require the other to watch them die." He cupped my face with his free hand, the one not holding a gun. "Please, Claire. Let me end this knowing you're safe. That's the only thing that makes this worth it." I wanted to argue, to fight, to refuse to be protected while he walked back into danger. But I also understood what he was asking. Trust. The same trust I demanded from him in his study. "You come back to me," I said fiercely. "However this ends, you come back. That's the deal." He kissed me, hard and desperate, and tasting like smoke and fear. Deal. Then he was pushing me toward the vehicle, toward his men who pulled me inside despite my protests. The door closed and we were moving, accelerating away from the mansion while I watched through the rear window as Vittorio ran back toward the burning building, back toward the war, back toward danger I couldn't protect him from. I pressed my hand against the glass and prayed to gods I wasn't sure I believed in that he'd keep his promise. That partnership meant something beyond convenient arrangements and strategic alliances. That he'd survive long enough to discover whether what we'd started was real, or just 2 people finding comfort in the darkest possible circumstances. The mansion disappeared behind trees in distance, orange glow marking its location like a beacon. I closed my eyes and waited for news I wasn't sure I wanted to receive. The secondary location was a penthouse in Manhattan, fortified and anonymous, where I spent 4 hours pacing expensive hardwood while Vittorio's men maintained tactical silence. No updates, no information. Just grim-faced guards who wouldn't meet my eyes and the slowly lightening sky beyond bulletproof windows that told me dawn was coming whether I was ready or not. My phone sat on the kitchen counter, useless. Every number I might call would either not answer or couldn't help. I was trapped in a luxury cage waiting to learn if the man I'd kissed 12 hours ago was alive or bleeding out in the ruins of his mansion. When the door finally opened at 6 a.m., I spun around expecting Vittorio. Instead, one of his lieutenants entered, the one I'd heard him call Sergio. His suit was torn, dried blood on his collar, exhaustion carved into the lines around his eyes. "He's alive," Sergio said before I could ask. "Injured, but alive. Being treated at a private facility. Relief hit so hard my knees buckled. I caught myself against the counter. How badly injured?" "Gunshot wound to the shoulder, through and through, clean exit. He's had worse." Sergio moved to pour himself coffee with steady hands that had probably killed men hours ago. "He's asking for you." I grabbed my jacket without hesitation. "Take me to him." The private facility was a clinic in a neighborhood I didn't recognize. The kind of place that asked no questions and kept no official records. Sergio led me through hallways that smelled like antiseptic and old money, to a room where Vittorio sat on an examination table, torso bare except for the professional bandaging covering his left shoulder, arguing with a doctor in Italian. He looked up when I entered, and something in his expression shifted, softened. "You're supposed to be at the safe house. You're supposed to be invincible." I crossed to him, needing to confirm with my own hands that he was real and breathing. Guess we're both disappointing expectations. His good arm came around my waist, pulling me close. "The attack is over. We held position long enough for reinforcements. Most of their assault team is dead or captured, including their leadership. And yours?" I touched the edge of his bandage carefully. "How many did you lose?" 3 confirmed dead, 7 wounded, 2 critically." His jaw tightened. Acceptable losses given the circumstances, but still losses. I thought about 3 families receiving news their loved ones weren't coming home. 3 more deaths in a war that started with a wrong suitcase. "I'm sorry." "Don't. His grip on my waist tightened. Those men knew the risks. They died protecting what's theirs. There's honor in that. The doctor said something sharp in Italian. Vittorio responded with what sounded like a dismissal. The doctor threw up his hands and left, muttering what I assumed were Italian curses. "You're being a difficult patient," I observed. "He wants me to stay for observation. I have more important things to do." He was already reaching for his shirt with his good arm, wincing at the movement. I helped him, easing fabric over bandages with more gentleness than he probably deserved. Like what? The Albanian leadership is eliminated. Their assault failed. What's left? Consolidation. Making sure their remaining organization understands the new hierarchy. Securing territory before someone else tries to claim it. He stood, steadier than he should be with a bullet wound. "And finishing what you started. The article." Understanding clicked into place. "You still want me to publish?" "More than ever." He pulled out his phone, typed one-handed with practiced ease. "The attack last night gives you a hook. Albanian criminal organization attempts mass violence to prevent exposure of corruption network. It's not just about financial crimes anymore. It's about public safety." I watched him work through pain and exhaustion, planning his next move before the current crisis had fully resolved. "You never stop, do you? Never just pause to process or recover?" "Processing is for when the war is won." He sent whatever message he'd been composing and focused on me fully. "Right now we have a window. Their organization is fractured, their leadership dead, their people scared. If you publish in the next 48 hours, you can expose the embedded network before anyone has time to cover their tracks or consolidate under new command." He was right. Journalistically, strategically, this was the perfect moment. Strike while the enemy was weakest, publish while the story had maximum impact. But the calculation of it, the immediate pivot from life-or-death combat to media strategy, felt inhuman. "You were almost killed 6 hours ago," I said quietly. "Doesn't that warrant even a moment of just being human?" Something flickered across his face. "Being human gets people killed. Being strategic keeps them alive." He moved closer, his good hand coming up to cup my cheek. "I learned that when my father died, because he trusted the wrong person. Let emotion override judgment. I won't make his mistake." The pain beneath his words was old and deep. What happened to him? A supposed ally invited him to negotiate territory disputes. My father went alone, believing in honor among thieves. His thumb traced my cheekbone. They executed him and sent me photographs to make sure I understood what trust costs. I covered his hand with mine. "How old were you?" 22. Old enough to inherit his organization. Young enough to make 1,000 mistakes learning how to run it. His eyes were distant, looking at memories I couldn't see. I swore I'd never let emotion compromise my judgment again. Never trust based on feeling rather than evidence. Never value anything more than survival. And yet you came back for me last night. I held his gaze. Alone, through a battlefield, despite tactical wisdom saying I was acceptable collateral damage. "You're not collateral damage." The words came out fierce, almost angry. "You're—" He stopped, jaw working like he was fighting against something he couldn't quite articulate. "I'm what?" I pressed. "Important." He said it like the admission cost him something. "To the plan, to the strategy, to exposing the Albanians. You're important." "Just to the plan?" I moved closer, until we were almost touching, because it felt like more than strategic value when you kissed me in that hallway, when you told me to stay safe so you could focus on fighting. His forehead dropped to rest against mine. "You're terrifying, you know that? You make me want things I gave up wanting years ago. Makes me forget that everyone I've ever cared about ended up dead or betrayed. I'm not going to betray you." I said it like a vow. "And I'm not planning on dying. We're partners, remember? That means we figure this out together, even the parts that don't make sense." His voice was rough. "Even when partnership looks suspiciously like something neither of us should want. Especially then." I kissed him softly, carefully, mindful of his injury. "Now stop trying to distract me with emotional revelations, and let's finish what we started." That pulled something close to a laugh from him. Using my own tactics against me. Learning from the best. I stepped back, shifting into professional mode because he needed me functional, not melting into feelings we didn't have time to process. Show me what you have on the embedded network. Everything you can prove without compromising your own operations. I'll write it in a way that destroys them while keeping you invisible. We spent the next 6 hours at the penthouse, Vittorio providing documents while I transformed raw intelligence into journalism that would survive editorial scrutiny. Names, positions, transactions, evidence of systemic infiltration spanning months. I wrote it clean and factual, letting the evidence speak for itself, building a case that would demolish careers and trigger investigations. My editor at the Times responded to my pitch within an hour. This is explosive. Source credibility? Multiple anonymous intelligence sources, corroborated documentation, verified through independent channels. I typed back, using the standard language for exactly this situation. Everything is documented and provable. The usual protection for confidential sources applies. When can you have the full article? 24 hours. It needs to run immediately. Time sensitive for reasons I can't disclose. A pause, then. I trust you, Claire. Send it when it's ready. We'll fast track for tomorrow's edition. I showed Vittorio the exchange. He nodded approval. Good. Now finish it. I finished it at 3 a.m. 12,000 words documenting a conspiracy that would end careers and possibly start criminal prosecutions. Vittorio read it twice, suggesting only minor redactions that protected his specific operations, while leaving the Albanian network fully exposed. This will work, he said finally. This will destroy what's left of their infrastructure. It'll also make me a target again. I wasn't naive about the consequences. Anyone connected to this network who survives your war will want me dead. They already want you dead. He closed my laptop. At least this way you're a target with a platform. Makes you harder to eliminate quietly. Public figures have protection through visibility. That's your idea of reassurance. It's realistic assessment. He stood, wincing slightly at the movement that pulled his shoulder. You'll have security. My people. Watching from a distance. Making sure no one makes you disappear. But you'll also have your life back. Your career. Your name on stories that matter. That's what you wanted, isn't it? It was. Exactly what I'd wanted before a wrong suitcase turned my world sideways. But something about the way he phrased it, like he was already planning my exit from his life, made my chest tight. And you? I asked. Where do you fit in this future where I'm a public figure with your invisible protection? Where I've always fit. In the shadows. Handling problems before they reach you. He said it like it was obvious. You can't be connected to me publicly, Claire. Association would destroy your credibility and put you in more danger than any protection could mitigate. So, we just what? Pretend this never happened? I gestured between us. Partnership ends the moment my article publishes. Partnership continues differently, but his expression was closed, controlled, from a distance appropriate to both our survival. That's bullshit. Anger flared, hot and sudden. You're doing it again. Calculating strategic value instead of acknowledging that maybe, possibly what's between us matters beyond tactical considerations. What's between us is dangerous, he said quietly. For both of us. You make me vulnerable in ways I can't afford, and I make you a target in ways you shouldn't have to live with. So you're protecting me by pushing me away. I stood, needing to match his height, his presence, making decisions for both of us based on your damage and your rules. Based on reality. His control was cracking. I've seen what happens to people I care about. They become leverage, become targets, become collateral damage in wars they never asked to fight. I won't do that to you. You're not doing anything to me. I'm choosing. I moved closer, forcing him to see me. I'm choosing to finish this fight we started. I'm choosing to use my platform to expose corruption. And I'm choosing you, even though it's complicated and dangerous and probably stupid. Claire? No. I cut him off. You told me partnership means trust. So trust that I know what I'm risking. Trust that I'm strong enough to handle it. Trust that maybe, just maybe, I'm worth the vulnerability. He stared at me like I was the equation he couldn't solve. A problem that refused to follow predictable patterns. Then his good arm came around me, and he was kissing me like the world was ending. like I was the only solid thing in a life built on violence and strategy and careful emotional distance. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "You're going to get us both killed." "Probably." I smiled despite everything. "But at least it'll be interesting." He laughed. Actual laughter that sounded rusty from disuse. "You're insane." "I'm yours." The words escaped before caution could stop them. "If you want me." His ice-blue eyes held mine, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw something besides calculation and control. I saw want, raw and undeniable and terrifying in its honesty. "I want you." He said it like a confession. "More than I've wanted anything in years, which is exactly why this is dangerous." "Then be dangerous with me." I touched the edge of his bandage. "Send the article. End this war. And figure out what we are when the smoke clears." He kissed me again, softer this time, like a promise. "When the smoke clears." I sent the article to my editor at dawn. It published 12 hours later under my byline, front page above the fold. Exactly the career-defining story I'd always wanted. Senator Richardson was arrested within hours. 14 government employees were suspended pending investigation. The Albanian network I'd exposed began crumbling as people scrambled to save themselves. And somewhere in the shadows, Vittorio Rossi consolidated his victory, while keeping his promise to protect the journalist, who'd accidentally stolen his suitcase, and somehow stolen something far more valuable in the process. 6 weeks after publication, I stood in my new office overlooking Central Park, reading congratulations emails from colleagues who'd never returned my pitches before. The Pulitzer nomination had arrived yesterday. 3 major networks wanted me for interview segments. My inbox overflowed with opportunities that would have seemed impossible 2 months ago. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt oddly hollow. The apartment Vittorio had arranged sat empty most nights. Too large, too perfect, too much like a gilded cage I'd chosen but didn't quite inhabit. He visited occasionally, always late, always careful to arrive and leave unseen. We'd fall into each other with desperate hunger, like people stealing moments between wars. But morning always came with the same careful distance. Partnership from appropriate distance, just like he'd promised. I hated it. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Dinner tonight. The usual place. 8 o'clock. The usual place was a restaurant with private rooms and owners who knew when to forget faces. I'd been there 4 times in 6 weeks, always with Vittorio, always in shadows that kept us separate from the public life I was building. It felt like an affair, secretive and compartmentalized, except we weren't betraying anyone but ourselves. I arrived at 8 wearing the kind of dress I never used to own. Designer label courtesy of money I'd never asked for, but that appeared anyway. Vittorio's way of providing without acknowledging he was doing it. The host recognized me with a discreet nod and led me to a private room where Vittorio already waited. He looked good, better than he had 6 weeks ago, with a bullet wound and exhaustion carved into his features. The shoulder had healed cleanly, leaving only a scar he'd probably add to his collection without comment. Tonight he wore a navy suit that made his ice-blue eyes even more striking, and when he stood to greet me, something in my chest twisted painfully. This wasn't sustainable. Couldn't be. "You look beautiful," he said, pulling out my chair. "You look alive." I sat, accepting the wine he poured, which is more than I expected after that battle. "I'm resilient." He settled across from me, close enough to touch but maintaining careful distance. "How are you handling the attention? The nomination must be overwhelming." "It's surreal." I took a drink, buying time to organize thoughts that felt scattered. 3 months ago, I couldn't get editors to return my calls. Now I'm being courted by every major publication in the country. You earned it. The article was exceptional. The article was possible because of you. I held his gaze. Because you trusted me with information that could have destroyed you as easily as it destroyed them. Calculated risk that paid off for both of us. But his expression suggested the calculation had involved variables he hadn't fully accounted for. Your career is established now. You have options, opportunities, the kind of future you wanted. The way he said it made my stomach drop. Why does that sound like a goodbye speech? He set down his glass with careful precision. Because I've been thinking about what's best for you going forward. about how my continued presence in your life limits your opportunities, rather than expanding them. Don't. I cut him off before he could build momentum. Don't make decisions for me based on what you think I need. Someone has to think clearly. His control was perfect, but I'd learned to see beneath it. You're building something important, Claire. A reputation, a platform, actual influence. Association with me jeopardizes all of that, so you're protecting me again. Anger flared hot and familiar, pushing me away from my own good without asking what I actually want. What you want isn't always what's best for you. He leaned forward slightly. You're 29 years old with your entire career ahead of you. I'm 34 with more blood on my hands than I can count, and enemies that multiply faster than I can eliminate them. This isn't sustainable. You keep saying that word. Sustainable. I set down my own glass before I threw it. Like we're a business arrangement that needs quarterly review, instead of two people who actually care about each other. Caring isn't enough. His voice was quiet but firm. Caring doesn't stop bullets or prevent investigations or protect you from the reality of what I am. I know what you are. I leaned forward to match his posture. I've known since you showed up at my apartment with 20 armed men. I'm not naive, Vittorio. I'm not some innocent you need to shield from harsh truth. I'm a journalist who's investigated organized crime for years. I understand exactly who you are and what you do. Understanding intellectually is different from living with it daily. His jaw tightened. From looking over your shoulder constantly. From wondering if every car following you is surveillance or assassination. From knowing that people you love become leverage against you. Is that what this is about? Understanding clicked into place. You're scared. Not of what might happen to you, but what might happen to me because of you. I've seen it before. The admission came rough. People I cared about targeted because someone wanted leverage over me. My father. 2 of my closest friends. A woman I thought I might build something with before she was kidnapped and murdered to send me a message. His eyes were distant. Haunted. I won't watch that happen to you. The pain beneath his words was raw and real. So instead, you'll just push me away preemptively. Protect me by making sure I never matter enough to be used against you. Yes. No hesitation. No apology. Because that's the only thing that keeps you safe in the long term. I stood, needing movement to channel the emotions threatening to overwhelm strategic thinking. What if I don't want to be safe? What if I want to choose the dangerous option because it means actually living instead of just surviving? Then you're thinking with emotion instead of logic. He stood as well, following me to the window overlooking the city. And emotion gets people killed. So does isolation. I turned to face him. So does cutting yourself off from anything meaningful because you're terrified of losing it. You told me your father died because he trusted the wrong person. Let emotion override judgment. But maybe the real lesson isn't to never trust anyone. Maybe it's to trust the right person and fight like hell to protect them. I am protecting you. His hands found my shoulders. By keeping distance between us before it's too late. It's already too late. I met his ice blue gaze without flinching. We passed too late weeks ago. Probably passed it in my apartment when you could have killed me, but offered protection instead. Definitely passed it in your study when you kissed me like I was worth the vulnerability you've spent years avoiding. His grip tightened. Claire, I love you. The words escaped before caution could stop them. Raw and honest and terrifying. I'm in love with you. Which is possibly the stupidest thing I've ever admitted considering who we are and how we met. But it's true. And pushing me away doesn't change that. It just makes us both miserable while pretending it's noble. Silence stretched between us. Heavy with everything he wasn't saying. His hand stayed on my shoulders. Grip firm like he was afraid I'd disappear if he let go. This is a mistake, he said finally. Everything about this is a mistake. Probably. I moved closer, until we were almost touching. So make the mistake with me. Stop calculating odds and just be here, with me, figuring out how to make this work, instead of why it can't. I don't know how to do that. The admission sounded like it cost him. I don't know how to be with someone without the walls I've built to survive. Then we learned together. I reached up to touch his face, feeling the tension in his jaw. We figure it out the same way we figured out everything else. Partnership, remember? Trust that I'm strong enough for this. Trust that what we have is worth the risk. His eyes closed briefly. war visible in the lines of his face. When they opened again, something had shifted. Not surrender exactly, but acceptance. If I do this, if I let you in completely, you need to understand there's no going back. My world doesn't offer exit strategies or trial periods. You're either in or you're out. And choosing in means accepting everything that comes with it. I'm already in. I said it like a vow. I chose that when I grabbed your hand in my apartment instead of running. When I published your secrets knowing it made me a target. When I fell in love with a man who terrifies me and protects me in equal measure. I'm in, Vittorio. Question is whether you're brave enough to let me stay. He kissed me then, fierce and desperate and tasting like surrender he'd been fighting for weeks. His arms came around me and I went willingly, needing the contact like oxygen. This wasn't the careful, controlled kisses we'd shared in shadows. This was raw and honest and accepting, finally, that what we'd started couldn't be contained in careful compartments. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. This is insane. Welcome to my life since the airport. I smiled despite everything. We match now. Something that might have been laughter escaped him. You're going to be the death of me, or the saving of you. I pulled back just enough to meet his gaze. Either way, we're doing it together. 3 months later, I moved into the rebuilt mansion in the Hamptons. Not as a protected asset or temporary guest, but as someone who belonged there. My office overlooked the ocean, filled with awards and articles and evidence of a career that somehow thrived, despite my association with a man the world only knew as a shadow. Vittorio's men accepted me with the same calm professionalism they applied to everything, calling me Miss Williams with respect that felt earned rather than obligatory. Lucia fussed over me like I was family, teaching me Italian phrases and smiling knowingly when Vittorio appeared at unexpected hours just to see me. The work continued. I wrote exposés on corruption that Vittorio's intelligence network uncovered, stories that demolished careers and triggered investigations, while keeping their source carefully invisible. We became a team in ways that extended beyond personal relationship into something operationally seamless. My journalism provided cover for his operations, while his resources made my investigations possible. It shouldn't have worked. Probably violated a dozen ethical guidelines I'd once considered sacred. But in the space between law and justice, between what was legal and what was right, we found a way to matter. I was at my desk editing an article about police corruption when Vittorio appeared in the doorway, holding something familiar. A black suitcase, identical to the one I'd grabbed from JFK months ago. "What's this?" I asked, even though I already knew. "New assignment." He set the suitcase on my desk, ice blue eyes glinting with something that might have been amusement. Files on a trafficking network operating through the Port Authority. Documentation, witness testimonies. Enough evidence to bring down a dozen connected operations. I opened the suitcase, finding exactly what he'd described. Then I looked up at him, at the man who'd walked into my life through violence and chaos, and somehow became the most solid thing in it. "You know, this is probably how we started. Wrong suitcase, dangerous information, people trying to kill us." I remember. He moved behind my chair, hands finding my shoulders. "The difference is this time you grabbed the right suitcase, the one meant specifically for you. No accidents, no coincidences, just partnership." I leaned back into his touch, already analyzing the files with journalists' eyes that had learned to see patterns others missed. "And when this story triggers another war, then we fight it together." His grip tightened slightly, grounding and possessive in equal measure. "Like we fight everything now." I pulled his hand to my lips, kissed scarred knuckles that had protected me more times than I could count. Together. Outside my window, the ocean stretched endless and dark under afternoon sun. Somewhere in the city, corrupt officials were conducting business they thought was invisible. Somewhere in the shadows, Vittorio's network was documenting their crimes, building cases that I would transform into journalism that couldn't be ignored. We'd become something that shouldn't exist, a partnership between journalist and criminal, between light and shadow, between exposure and protection. But in a world where the law often protected the corrupt and punished the powerless, maybe that was exactly what was needed. Someone willing to operate in the spaces between, to use every tool available regardless of their origin, to fight for justice even when it meant compromising purity. I opened my laptop and started writing, Vittorio reading over my shoulder, both of us engaged in the strange dance we'd perfected over months of learning each other. My words, his intelligence, our combined determination to burn down systems that deserved burning. Starting with the wrong suitcase had led me here, to a life I never imagined, with a man I shouldn't want, doing work that existed in moral gray spaces I'd once thought were indefensible. But looking at the evidence spread before me, at the opportunity to expose trafficking networks that destroyed lives, at the man whose presence behind me felt like home despite every logical reason it shouldn't, I couldn't bring myself to regret a single moment. Not the terror of that first night, not the explosion that killed my neighbors, not the war that taught me what violence actually looked like when it wasn't sanitized for headlines. All of it had led here, to purpose and partnership, and a love that made no sense but somehow worked anyway. I started typing, and Vittorio's hand found mine, and together we began dismantling another network of corruption that thought itself untouchable. Wrong suitcase, right destination.